Hi, this is Forrest Briggs. I'm a professional photographer and videographer located here in Greenville, South Carolina, and you're watching the Depth of Field podcast. And today we're chatting with Eric Wunderlich, who is a member of the men's 1996 U.S. Olympic swim team. Eric, how are you today?
I'm good, Forrest. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to sit and chat with you and catch up with you. We've known each other since way back in the '80s. I was for those listeners that are out there. I was friends with Forrest's big brother Derek all the way through middle school and high school, growing up in Atlanta, Georgia.
I vaguely remember you as a kid swimming at North Harbor. I remember your sister's name, Gretchen. 5-year-olds just remember the most random weird things, and then forgot about you until you and Derek graduated. And actually, I take that back. I think I saw you, blazing through the neighborhood at 50 miles an hour in your car.
Yeah, ran over your sister's cat. Yeah.
I heard about that. I think I heard about that actually like 5 years ago. It wasn't as a kid. What happened?
I'll forever remember that. I was with Daniel First and Jeff Cohen and some other kid that had like the new Firebird that year. So 87,
Right.
88 Firebird, whatever.
Yep.
The one from Knight Rider. And
Oh yeah.
it was
David Hasselhoff.
so cool. And we were screaming past your house, in between your house and Taylor Montague's house. And
Yes.
well, I remember getting hurt on his trampoline one time.
You too, huh?
Yeah, I think every kid in the neighborhood did at some point. And we hit your cat, but we didn't kill it with the vehicle strike. And I think Daniel ran up to your doorbell. I think Derek was home. Monique was definitely home. And as she came out of the house, the other kid, who I can't remember his name, had like a BB gun pistol in his trunk. It wasn't the best influence on us, but
right.
he ended the cat's misery, like as your sister walked out of the house. And I was like, oh God, like couldn't have been any worse. And she was devastated. And I think we hung out for, 5 minutes and then peeled out of there and got into more trouble somewhere. But that thing's tone. And it was daylight out. I remember that. But I mean, your sister was devastated. We felt horrible about it. So don't bring it up.
Yeah.
But I'm still deeply apologetic for killing her cat back in the 80s.
I must have blocked it from my memory, or they just lied to me and said the cat ran away.
Probably. Because I mean, how much older is Derek than you?
We're 4 years apart, so he was 70. I'm late 73.
Right. So if you figure you're 12 to 14.
Right.
Don't tell Forrest. Yeah.
Right. We'll keep the magic alive.
Yes. The cat went off and found a mate, and they ran off, and they're having kittens somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
What and I'm curious, you were just the dedication, in high school. It's one thing you're playing, on the school football team and whatever, run the seasonal sport, but were you training year round for swimming?
Yeah, swimming you get like 2 weeks off, right? Or maybe 3. You get a week off in August after your summer championships are done, and you get like a week off in roughly April when your spring season's done. So the rest of the time you're in the water, and sometimes more intense than others. But Christmas is between December 20th and January 10th. You're getting demolished every day, whether that's local or you're on a training trip. If you're in college or your team takes a trip somewhere, that's all you're doing is you're wet all day pretty much, either in the gym or doing some sort of dry land training or in the water. So, it was a lot, and it increased as you got older. So, 13, 14 years old, you're doing maybe 7 workouts a week. You're getting in a couple of mornings and then every evening. And then, the next couple of years, maybe you're doing 3 or 4 mornings. And then by the time I was, 18, senior in high school, it was 10 workouts a week pretty much. And there's a couple athletes that do more than that. I know Michael's done more than that when he was at his prime. Not that he's still not still in shape. He absolutely is. and sprinters do a little less, but for the most part, on average, I think most swimmers are 10 workouts a week. So one morning off during the weekdays, every evening, and then usually a Saturday morning. And then most of us, I think, have Sunday completely off. That model may be different now. I don't know. I'm pretty far removed from competitive swimming, but yeah, I still don't like to shower or get wet on Sunday at 53 years old. I'm like, if I have to shower, I'll shower. But for the most part, that's my dry day.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's understandable. So when you're in middle school, high school, whatever, your alarm clock goes off at what time, and then
Oh,
take me from there.
high school was the worst because, in growing up in Atlanta, there are so many different school districts that kids would pull into that program. And I swam at Dynamo out on Shallowford Road in Chamblee, which looks totally different today than it did back in 1985. Um, we had to start our practices really early so that, if I remember it, the Gwinnett County kids could get to their homeroom on time, which was like 7:30 a.m. Riverwood was, I think it was 8:40 or 8:50. So
Mm,
I still had, ample time after morning practice was done to go back and do homework or sleep for an hour or whatever I didn't do the night before, because I was up at 4:10 every day that I had practice in high school in the mornings. And like I said earlier, it wasn't um, every day, but it was, 3 or 4 days a week most of the time through high school, where either my mom was driving me and sleeping in the parking lot, or I was driving, the last couple of years of school. And I would come home. I'd be home by 7, and then either
yeah.
sleep for an hour or do homework for an hour. Obviously, eat for part of that time. Get ready try to scrub the chlorine off, which doesn't really happen until you finally retire from the sport, as you well know as a swimmer yourself. Um, yeah, it was brutal. So I was, weeknights I was going to bed. If I was up past 9:30, I knew I was going to be hurting the next day, and Miss Modeling's English class, or Miss Moses's calculus or analysis class, which always was.
Right.
Had one of those classes after lunch. I always had a really drab 18th century English or a hard math class right after lunch, and that's when your energy level drops because all the blood's in your stomach.
Right.
God, brutal. I don't miss that. I don't miss.
All right. So then the 3 o'clock bell rings and school's out, and then what happens?
Yeah. So, and I will throw Riverwood absolutely under the bus right now. So,
As you should.
yeah, they had a small parking lot, and only the
Mm,
true Riverwood athletes got parking passes as a junior. So, as a junior and as a sophomore, when I was able to drive, I had to park way down the street in front of Biffy Jaffe's house.
mm,
Across that main drag, across Hertz Ferry, and then like another block, and towards the end. Uh,
jeez.
yeah, because that's where everybody had to park. Was as close as you could, and it was the first place you wouldn't get towed. So,
They treat all future Olympians the same way, so you're not special.
100%, yes, yes. And Riverwood's produced so many. Um, but yeah, I remember like walking to and from, and I'd have to hustle after school because we were usually in the water in the weight room at 4 or 4:15, and we would get out at 3:15, 3:30, somewhere in there. So
Mm,
at that point, there were only 1.2 million people that lived in Atlanta, so it was a little easy
right.
to get from the Sandy Springs area over to Chamblee, but it was usually tight, and I was running in, throwing clothes off, throwing stuff on the bleachers, and diving in at 4, getting into the weight room, usually a couple minutes late. And I had coaches that were firm believers in the fact that if you were late at all to practice, you started at the beginning. So you would try to catch up. And that was whether or not we were home training on a regular weekday or on training camp. I will forever remember this story. We had training camp one summer before '88 trials that were in Austin, Texas. We were training up in Utah, outside Salt Lake City. For those of you that are ski or snowboarders, we were staying at Snowbird up Cottonwood Canyon, or Little Cottonwood Canyon. And one of my other teammates that went to Dunwoody High School, we were shopping, for stuff we didn't need, winter clothing gear in Atlanta. We were looking
Right.
at snowboarding and skiing stuff, and we missed the vans down to practice. And it was probably about a 15-mile trip, but purely down the mountain. So Jeff gets this idea, Jeff Vance, he gets this great idea. Let's rent mountain bikes and ride down. We'll be a little late to practice probably, but then we'll just throw our bikes in the van and the coaches can drive us back up after practice. So we were late.
Right.
We had to start at the beginning of practice. We finally caught up probably an hour into practice. We caught what
Right.
everybody else was doing. So then we were kind of where we needed to be. And after practice, we pushed our bikes over to the vans, and our head coach looked at us like, no, you got down here on those. You're getting back up there on those. And we just kind of looked at each other like, oh my God. Because it was 100% uphill. It was like, 6 or 7
Good God.
climb. Yeah.
And that's after the grueling
After
workout.
practice, right? And we're like, well, we dug our graves. And so we started riding, and probably 2 miles out of the neighborhood where the pool was where we were training, they were around the bend on a curve, and they picked us up, and we were sweating it thinking this is going to be a 4+ hour ride back up to the hotel where we were staying. But we learned a lesson. I try not
Right.
to be late for anything because of that. So thanks, Coach Braunfeld. That was outstanding.
Excellent, excellent. Do me a favor and give me a quick recap of your medals, titles, accolades, all that good stuff. Now's your time to humbly brag.
Sure. It's short because there's not a whole lot of medals. But I jest. Let's see. I had one NCAA title in the 200 breast in 1993 as a senior. I had 3 other national championships at USA Swimming National Championship meets. So those were cool. So 4 national titles.
Very cool.
Had an American record in the 200 breaststroke short course meters in 1993 at the first ever short course meters world championships that they had in Mallorca, Spain.
Awesome.
There in the Balearic. Yeah, beautiful place for a meet, and pretty cool experience to go to that. They only took 10 of us,
Yeah.
10 men, 10 women.
Wow.
So it was
Wow.
the first time they ever had that meet. So we were kind of the guinea pigs. But
Yeah.
yeah, we set an American record in the relay, and I had an American record in the 200 breast. And then
Gosh, that's great.
we actually we had a world record also in the medley relay. We had an American record and then a world record. So I do have a ring somewhere and a certificate. They're buried away probably in a closet or in my Florida basement, otherwise known as a storage unit, which comes at an additional cost when you live in Florida. So it's
yes,
somewhere.
it does.
I don't wear them a lot. The only jewelry I wear is the wedding ring. So,
Right.
yeah,
The one that's required.
yeah, exactly. It is, but it's warranted by law and by the church. And
Right.
yeah, so I think those are the biggies. I was 7th at Olympic trials as a high school senior in '88.
God, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. There were a couple of high school kids made it. One actually made it in one of my events. So I was kind of envious of him being, a rising senior, and I was an outgoing senior. I was like, man, I was close, but not close enough. And then
Yeah.
92 trials, I redshirted the season from college competition, and just trained for 92 trials and got third and third. And for those of you that don't know how that works, the Americas, all the swim teams take top 2. So I was an alternate and an alternate, which means I got to sign a piece of paper that said I would train and stay in shape in case something Nancy Kerrigan-esque happened to one of the other swimmers, and I declined. Pushed the paper back across the table and said, no, I'm going to play beach volleyball and work out and grow a beard and grow my hair long and get ready for my senior year of college. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to show up as an alternate. Either I earned it or I didn't.
Right.
And so, yeah, went through my senior year at Michigan and won the NCAA title and figured I'm still in shape. I'll swim through summer nationals and see what happens. Maybe I'll get to go to an international team or a national team trip. Ended up 93. I think I was second, and I qualified for our national team and went to the meet that summer. I think it was in Edmonton, Canada. I don't remember. My
Yeah.
are fuzzy. 93 Pan Pacific Championships was our big national team trip. So, that was Japan. Sorry, I went to Japan for that. And it was interesting being an American in Japan in 1993 because
Oh yeah.
kids and the locals see these big white guys walking around in parkas and stuff, and in the summer in Japan, and they all thought we were basketball players because we were like 6'2", 6'3", 6'5". We don't look
Right.
basketball team, and most of us are not very good at basketball. Most swimmers. Um,
Right.
so did okay there. I think won a couple of international medals at that competition. Our relay did well. And I was like, well, that's when I decided to stay on another 4 months and go through that short course world championships meet where I did real well. Beyond that, I just kind of kept going in 4 month increments. Like, well, I'll just train through this international trip coming up in April. Then this one in the summer, I'll go through that nationals. And after the summer of 94, we went to world champs. I got second in the 200 breast. Our relay won. I thought, all right, well, I was getting ready to hang it up. I was actually going to move to Birmingham, Alabama, and start coaching with Bob Bowman, who coached the Birmingham Swim League, who was a good friend. I figured I'd be close enough to Atlanta. I could go home and see my family, my sister and her 2 kids and her husband, and my mom was still there. And I figured I'd go home on weekends and goof off, and then I'd go back and swim coach in Alabama on the weekdays. And so I called Bob after World Champs, and I said, Bob, I think I want to keep swimming. I think I want to give it a shot and try to go through the Atlanta Olympics in '96. Being a hometown kid, that would be a pretty unique opportunity.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, as it turns out, I'm leaving Birmingham and I'm moving out to Napa, California, to coach with Paul Bergen, who was a very good breaststroke coach. Coached Tracy Calkins in Nashville, Nick Nevid up in Canada. So had some pretty unbelievable results with 2 great swimmers. And he said, why don't you
Yeah.
here? And if you're still going to swim, Paul and I will beat you near death and teach you how to be faster. And I was like, sounds great. Go. I
Yep.
should get out of Ann Arbor and leave John Urbanchek and the college team to do their thing. I'm a distraction more than I was an addition, and let's do it. So I moved out there and moved in with Bob, and on the weekends they had me out on Coach Bergen's horse farm building paddocks and mucking stalls, and I'm still not comfortable around race horses to these days. To this day, I know Bob has he has at least 1 or 2, I think, and Paul still has his, and but yeah, the horses know if you're comfortable around them, and
Oh,
if
yeah.
not, they step on you. I
Right.
didn't lose a toe or any appendage, but learned a lot, got in good shape, and I was the oldest kid on the team in California, so I was
Yeah.
25, training with a bunch of 13 to 17-year-olds.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, just between us girls. I would go out on the weekend in San Francisco and come back to practice on Monday morning in the locker room. Usually you're sharing stories of what happened over the weekend. I'd be like, hey,
Sure.
hey, Carl, I know you're 13. You're not going to understand any of the story, but you won't believe what happened to me this past weekend or something like that. It's goofy. Um, but they
Right.
were, while they weren't fantastic training partners in the water, they were great out of the water.
Mm.
So in the weight room, running, doing ultimate frisbee, playing all the stuff, the dry land training, they were great because their energy was, boundless.
Oh yeah.
But in the
Yeah.
water, it was challenging. So it was kind of me versus me most days,
Mm.
which I had benefited when I was at Michigan training with Mike Barrowman, who was the world record holder in 200 breaststroke. So I always had, the fastest guy in the pool to chase every single day, and I felt like I
Mm.
did that to improve, right,
Mm.
kind of doing it myself. And outside of breaststroke at Michigan, we always had, unbelievable guys from all around the world and around the U.S. in every stroke that were on deck at any given moment. So if, we were racing somebody in IM, you had Tom Dolan, you had Eric Namesnick. Freestyle, you had Gustavo Borges and Brent Lang and all these other guys that had, been national champs, American record holders, world record holders, their country's record holders. So
Mm-hmm.
I spent a year in Napa, kind of under
Yeah.
tutelage of Paul and Bob, and then moved back to Ann Arbor for the Olympic year, 95,
Mm.
6. And then at trials in 96, wound up, there was a I got third again in the 100 breasts the first day. There was a clock malfunction, and it came up that I was second, but I knew that the guy had won clearly beat me, and I saw the guy to my left that was a little bit ahead of me, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure about that. I don't think I was second. The results reshuffled, and I ended up being third. And my whole team and all my buddies across the pool deck were like, come on, man, the 200 breast is your best event. Don't worry about the 100, put it behind you. But I had to kind of sulk on that for, I think, 4 days or 5 days in between events, and then made the team. And
how'd you get past that?
Just, it was Alex. Alex was the assistant coach then. Alex Braunfeld was my assistant at Michigan, who I'd had in high school, was now the assistant at Michigan. So it was great environment for me to have not only these great swimmers in the water, but Coach Urbanchek and Coach Braunfeld on deck with me too. The guys that had known me the best and had trained me for the longest amount of time and knew me well and kind of knew what to say, and just really the basic, put it behind you, focused on the next thing, learn what you did, what you did right, what you did wrong. And this is your event. This is your time. This is what it's meant to be.
Learn from the mistake.
Yeah.
Learn from those mistakes.
And Eric Namesnick was my, one of my closest friends at Michigan, and was my roommate in trials, and just kind of every night was trying to pump me up. He's like, you're kind of a downer over there. I got my event the next day. Can you knock it off? We'd rib each other. But it was just, this was my last chance. It was my last hurrah. So I had nothing left to lose at that point. And, you've probably heard, other athletes talk about making an Olympic team, how it's oftentimes tougher to make the U.S. team than it is to make the podium at the Olympics. So competitive. I mean, if back in my day, which was a long time ago, many days ago, 30 years ago, I think we had 6 of the top 10 100 freestylers in the world, but only 2 of them could compete for a medal in the finals of the 100 freestyle. So we had a great free relay, of course, but the guy who's maybe third in the world wouldn't swim the individual event at the Olympics.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great competition in the U.S. At that time, and of course now. But try to move past it and focus on the task at hand, and getting in there and swimming your race. I always had a tough time swimming my race. I think I'm easily distractible now. Squirrel, and even then, I was the only times I ever really swam up to my potential was the time when I really focused on just my lane, the other end of the pool, the black line on the bottom of the pool, and not looking around and focusing on which athlete from which country was in which lane on which side of me. It was really counting strokes and monitoring my technique and kind of sticking to my own race plan that I had in my head, or what we talked about.
Somewhat meditative, would you say?
I don't know if I would go that far, me at 24, 25 years old. But it was more of just kind of not getting overly pumped up to listening to the music that I was listening to at the time, whether it be, AC/DC, Flick of the Switch, or whatever.
I pegged you as a winger guy.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I had a dog named Winger, but it was after the Red Wings,
Did you?
not the ill-fated Christian rock group.
Right.
But yeah, it was a good dog. He was a Jack Russell, long family dog. Yeah, and that name obviously came from going to school in Michigan for years. And we had Tiger too, but it was named after Woods, not the baseball team. But
gotcha. Yeah,
never really cheered for the Lions once Barry Sanders left. So good for them this year. They had a good showing. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So the Olympics, obviously you competed in '96, and I watched you. It was at the Tech Aquatic Center, right?
Yeah. It was a pretty cool experience. Most swimmer, I'll start with the opening ceremony. Swimming is always the first week of the games. It's always the first 8 days. So most swimmers, we taper, right? So you train really, really hard, and then before your event, you eliminate all the yardage. All you do is rest. We're too lazy to go to the fridge. We don't shower. We don't do anything other than get in the pool, because we're saving all our energy for that 1 or 2 minute race. And my event was day 6, so I was fortunate enough that I got to walk in the opening ceremony, which was,
Very cool.
it was incredible. Watching so many games on TV, over my lifetime, it's always a
Mm,
really neat thing to watch the host country kind of present their culture, their music, and kind of their history of that particular maybe city. So it was always really cool to watch that. So to be able to participate in it and walk live on TV around the world was pretty amazing. Um,
very.
as a hometown kid, I had connected with the local NBC affiliate. So Freddie Khalil from NBC Sports in Atlanta. Most people from Atlanta know who that is. Uh, they had given me like a handy cam, so I got to film stuff kind of behind the scenes, whether it was in the stands during the swimming competition or at the opening ceremony. So I have a whole bunch of bootleg footage somewhere. That
Cool.
he owns the rights to, so I can't broadcast that. But um, and parading down and making the walk from Old Fulton County Stadium to then the
Hmm.
to field, just across the one street was pretty amazing. I remember
Yeah.
walking across that street and seeing a couple of limos pull up, which was our dream team and the women's gymnastics team. So they didn't have to sit for 4 hours in Fulton County Stadium and get dehydrated
Right.
sitting in the stands or whatever. But we didn't care. We thought it was amazing that the handful of us that got to swim later in the week got to go and do that. Uh,
Yeah.
and then just walking in, I was filming and I had this handy cam up, the old handy cams, and cresting kind of the top of the stadium to come down the ramp into Turner Field. Um, Starting to see all these flash bulbs go off as the Americans came in, and then my video fades to black. And
Hmm.
I didn't know what had happened. Then all of a sudden I realized that I had dropped my arms to my side, kind of in awe of being in that stadium at that moment.
Yeah.
Goosebumps talking about it. And I realized I was still recording. And then all of a sudden it comes back up and you see flash bulbs and the infield filled with all the colors of all the nations and all their uniforming out there and their opening ceremony clothing was just breathtaking. Uh,
Mm,
Not as breathtaking as seeing Demi Moore along the track on the outside. She made my video because she and Bruce
absolutely.
were there with the kids when they were little. And I do remember and I ended up seeing the broadcast later, but they threw a baseball caption up on me saying Eric Wunderlich, hometown Atlanta, Georgia, 200-meter breaststroke swimming. It was pretty amazing because the camera guy was right in my face. And of course, all the teammates jump in. They're like, jumping over your shoulders. So I've got a tape of that somewhere, probably that same, Florida basement. Um, yeah, so that was pretty amazing experience just to go through the opening ceremony and then to sit around and wait until day 6 was like just nail biting, right? Watching everybody
Oh.
cheering for your teammates, hoping that these guys, win medals, and we're leading the medal count and seeing world
Mm,
records fall and American records fall and other national records fall.
mm.
Pretty cool to sit there and watch all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after your event was over, you headed to the Olympic Village or what?
Yeah, well, a little bit. So
Yeah.
my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, Ann Grossman,
Yeah.
she was down there staying with my family, and so she and I got to hang out a little bit. I think the last night of swimming, and the last night of swimming was the night that the bomb went off in Centennial Park. So
Yeah.
we were
Right.
all running around Buckhead, and we have everybody from Amanda Beard, who was 13 or 14 years old at the time, up to some of us that were 26, 27, I think was the oldest guy on the team. And I remember being
Mm.
Lulu's bait shack. For those of you that remember Buckhead and the bait shack, the big fish bowls with all the straws. Um,
Yeah, I was a few doors down. I think I was at Moondogs at a bar that was above or below that, but the same strip. And the place goes silent. Everyone's looking up at the TV, and
yeah,
we didn't know what was going on. It was crazy.
right. So we thought,
Yeah,
I think the initial reports that a transformer had blew or something like that. At least that's what they
yeah,
put up on the TV. And then they had given us pagers, right? Because there were cell phones, but we didn't have them because we were swimmers.
right.
Um,
Nor the strength to lift them. They were like what, 20 pounds back then.
Yes. I think I heard a story that Scottie Pippen had gotten the Dream Team all StarTAC flip phones. They're real thin, the Razor,
Mm,
and they just come out.
yeah,
That was 96,
yeah.
2000, so my story might be off a quadrennial. But um, and the dream team guys couldn't use them because their fingers were too big. So, but yeah, we had gotten blue Olympic Motorola pagers that had the rings on it, which I used for probably a decade after that, just as a travel alarm clock when I traveled.
Sure.
Because I never had it turned on for pager service, but we had it active during that 2 week period of the games. We all got paged to come back to a hotel just outside the village, where the U.S. Olympic Committee's board of directors and their executive director met us, welcomed us back.
Mm.
Most of us had been overserved at that point. I don't remember what time that night that was. It was before midnight, but
Yeah.
we were letting loose from 4 months of training, or 4 years of training for many of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they put us back on vans. I think 4 or 5 people at a time, took us back in. They had like a biometric security where you had to scan your hand to match your badge, and led us back into the village. And then, the coaches kind of talked to us and tried to calm us down and figure out what was going on. But we were done. So we were allowed
Yeah.
to go out and have fun and check out other sports. But it was very scary because we didn't know what had happened,
Yeah.
in the village. I remember, I'll vividly remember seeing the images of Janet Evans being interviewed live in the
Mm.
AT center there, and the bomb going off during her interview segment, and have her going, oh my God, and turning around and grabbing the interviewer, wondering what had happened, because she was
Mm.
a couple 100 feet away from where the bomb went off, but very scary.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Yeah. I'm curious. How did you first get into swimming?
How did I first get into swimming? So my
Yeah.
mom had 3 sisters growing up in
Yep.
Milwaukee, 2 older, 1 younger. And the older ones used to, push her in Lake Michigan and kind of hold her under the water. And she was always, as kids do to each other. So um, she was always very afraid of the pool and of the water.
Hmm.
And she got me
Yeah.
some lessons when we were still living in Wisconsin, when I was, 5, 6 years old. And I kicked and screamed and didn't want to go to the first time I had my first swim lesson when I was 5 or 6 years old. And then
Mm.
after we got home, I loved it and couldn't wait to go back, and went back,
Very cool.
did some lessons for a little bit, and joined the swim team. And remember going to my first meets somewhere outside of Milwaukee or Madison. I don't remember where that was exactly. And I think I got a ribbon for something in my heat or something. I don't remember, or if I did well in the event overall. I don't remember that detail.
Right. Best in class.
Yeah, something like that. It was before everybody got ribbons, so I think
Right.
I somewhat earned it for something. I don't know. It was
Right.
the '70s.
It was something to celebrate.
Exactly, something to celebrate.
Yep.
And then and did the typical kid thing. So played just about every sport growing up, and soccer and baseball and swimming, and I never played football.
Hmm.
Played flag maybe 1 year in middle school or something like that in Louisiana when we lived down there, but
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember if that was just PE or if that was organized against other schools. But when I
So was swimming on the periphery growing up just one of the several sports you did, or was there a time that you started to kind of pull away from the pack and realize, okay, I'm gifted in this area?
Yeah, good question. No, I had gotten to a point where I'd stopped playing soccer. And my mom was also not just didn't want me to be afraid of the water, but I was borderline hyperactive before there was ADHD or any of those things. So
Right.
uh,
Join the club.
yeah, she just wanted me to burn off energy, right? And swimming seemed to do that better than most other activities. So
Right.
got to a point where I was playing baseball and swimming, and I believe I was 13. So, and we were living in Louisiana, and I was kind of at the bottom of my middle school baseball team, but I was
Mm.
where my birthday fell. I was still competing as an 11, 12-year old. So I was the top of my swimming age group, but the bottom of my baseball ability age group. And I wasn't getting to play that much on the middle school team, but I was doing really well in the pool. And I said, Mom, Dad, I think I want to bail on baseball. I don't think I phrased it that way because nobody said that in 1982.
Mm-mm.
But I think I want to stick with swimming, and let's just do that, because I was doing well and having pretty good success there, and starting to make some teams where we would travel outside of Louisiana. So we would go to Mississippi, which I thought was really cool at the time. I don't think anybody really says that now, but except for my friends watching this that live in Mississippi, I apologize.
Right.
I think I got to go to a meet in Atlanta or in South Carolina.
Yeah.
When I was living in Louisiana, I was like, wow, we got to take a plane and got to go to a meet against other kids in their area and got to see what some other fast swimmers were doing in other areas, but didn't really click that I knew I was good, but I didn't know where I was good comparatively in the US. And I didn't really think about that. Then in 84, we had moved back to Atlanta. I had joined the Dynamo Swim Club up there in Chamblee and remember watching the Olympics in Atlanta, in LA, with my
Yeah.
mates and my family, and seeing Steve Lundquist, a hometown Atlanta guy, Jonesboro, win the 100 breaststroke and win the medley relay with his team, and Rowdy Gaines, the 100 freestyle, and Rick Carey doing real well, and all, the American women, Nancy Hogshead and Carrie Steinsheifer, tying for the gold medal in the 100 free. I was like, this is mind blowing. It was amazing.
Yeah.
When I really realized that there was more than, 13, 14-year-old age group swimming to be had out there, were time standards to achieve to get to a junior national level and to a senior national level and an Olympic trials level and an Olympic level. And that's when things finally clicked. Like, okay. And it wasn't even then, I wasn't even thinking about swimming in college, even though I was training with kids that were in college all the time. I was just new.
And you were how old at this point? You were how old?
14. Yeah. Like
Wow.
14. So I was like, oh, these kids are fast, but not that much faster than me. So maybe I'm getting close to at least being able to swim in college. I still didn't think about the Olympics, but then I knew what it was. And then I remember probably 86. So I was a sophomore in high school, coming up on a junior school, is when they announced the time standards for the next Olympic trials. And I wasn't that far off, right? Maybe second or two in the events that I was good at the time. And then kind of I realized that, if I just keep working hard, I'll get a little faster each season, which I always did, always a little bit of improvement. It was never giant leaps. It was always incremental, a little faster, a little better meet, a little faster kids, a little faster men. Then you're at a meet where there's got kids and men in it. And you're like, oh my God, those guys are so amazing, right? Because they were 25 or 26 and I was 16, 17, 18. I was like, wow, I ever get to be as fast as you. And then the next time I swim against them, I am as fast as you. I'm a little faster than you. It's just little successes here and there, and little achievements, weekly, daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally, and then annually, to the point where all of a sudden you're standing up on the blocks in the finals with the best guys in the U.S., which are usually the best guys in the world.
So how were you preparing yourself mentally, physically when you're age 14, 16?
At 14, 16, you're still thinking that all you really want to do are bicep curls because that's what the girls liked, right?
Right, right. And flies
Yeah.
and chest press.
Yes. Well, a little bit. Yeah. But I was doing a lot more exercises that were good for breaststroke.
Yeah.
So a lot of leg stuff, squat jumps, a lot of stuff without weights.
Yeah.
We started to do medicine ball at Dynamo, a lot of that when I was in Michigan in college. So a lot of the, partner medicine ball throws. And then, eating wise, I ate anything I could. I remember my mom cooking me cheeseburgers for breakfast in between, the 5 a.m. workout and 8:30
Right.
school when I got back. I would eat anything that was left over and anything that wasn't tied down. I think swimmers are kind of notorious for that, being able to throw it into their bodies because we know we're going to burn it off.
Right. Thousands of calories a day and a workout.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think I really even learned what an antioxidant was until I was probably 30 and running to lose weight after being retired from swimming and having a kid. And, I didn't know any of that stuff was. I learned more about nutrition from Runner's World magazine than I ever did on my own. I mean, yeah, you're guided by your coaches and the USOC staff to, eat the food pyramid and kind of thing, which is now, a topic of debate. But
correct.
Pasta was, I would eat a pound of spaghetti for dinner every night and throw in some chicken and throw in some cold cuts. And
yeah.
I remember my wife would come to visit me when we were dating before the Olympics in 96 when I was on the team. And she would see me, drink a 6-pack of Mountain Dew during the day, eat a dozen bagels, eat a pound of turkey, and then eat whatever I was going to do for dinner. Uh,
Right.
I didn't know nearly as much about nutrition then as we do now. There's so much information. Whichever path you're going to follow, whether you want to be vegan because you think that's right, or you want to be carnivore
Right.
or some hybrid, or whatever. There's so much information to be had, and you got to figure out what works for your body nowadays. So now I just
Yeah.
eat smart, work out some when I can, when I remember, when I don't hurt so bad from the workouts I did the day before. You definitely
Yes.
sore longer when you're 53 than you did when you were 23, but it's all
Yes.
part of the fun, right?
What are your workouts like these days? What do you do?
Oh, they are intermittent at best.
Mm.
All about closing the rings, right? I wish I need that T-shirt that says "I'm just here to close my rings."
Yes.
So I do go off of that a little bit, but I try to stay
Mm.
active. I do have a desk job where I'm in front of a Zoom camera part of the time. I travel some for work, but I do have. I wouldn't call it a full CrossFit gym in the garage, but I've got most
Mm.
equipment. I've got a Concept 2 rower. I've got an Airdyne. I've got free weights to 350 pounds and do a bunch of kettlebell stuff and a pull-up bar on the wall and still do double unders and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
My body can't endure it the way I used to, but I still
Mm.
enjoy doing some of that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
my wife and I opened a CrossFit gym with a couple other people in Ohio more than a decade ago that we still own
Excellent.
a share of, and it's still doing great. They're doing
What's the name of the CrossFit?
it's CrossFit Future up in Blacklick,
Okay.
just outside Columbus. And yes, as a Michigan grad, it pains me to have any types of ties to Columbus, Ohio. But the last couple of years,
It's understandable.
talk about the 15 years before that, not so much. Um, but from a football perspective only, all the other sports I think were good. But
Right. Right.
yeah, so I mean, CrossFit still does a bunch. I still like to bike out here. It's just flat. I live in Florida. I live in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and it's very flat. So
Mm.
you're pedaling
Yeah.
all the time. There's no downhill unless you catch a bridge over some body of water, and then it's only
Right.
30 seconds that you can actually cruise and rest. But there's also no uphills, so that's a benefit. Uh,
Yeah.
I do some of that.
Just repressive. Just repressive heat.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Summertime.
yeah, it is. It's definitely hot, sometimes stagnant. We're close enough to the beach down here that we get some ocean breeze, but I can't see the ocean from where I live. But um,
Right.
yeah, so some of that, some little kayaking here and there. I do some of that and play some golf. But I've got a 22-year-old son who's a college golfer, so golfing with him is I might as well just write him a check beforehand because I'm not going to bowl. Um,
Right.
I might win a bet on a hole where he thinks I'm going to miss the green. I might hit it, but not very often.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, worst thing ever was showing him the skins game. Back when he was probably 10 years old, because then it just turned into a money making opportunity for him. But we only did that for a couple of years,
Yeah.
so I didn't lose too much there.
Good. Happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. When you were swimming, did you have any rituals before you'd your competitions?
I did to a degree,
Yeah.
and they didn't vary too much season to season. So I was always making a mixtape, right? A tape on a Walkman, a cassette.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I had that, and we all had to have the sports Walkman because it was waterproof. Not that any of us ever really
Mm.
got them wet, but they were always,
The yellow one.
Yep, the yellow one, somewhat
Yep.
proof with the
Yep.
folding headphones that really weren't very good. Um,
Right.
so I'd make the mixtape, and then kind of up on the blocks, I'd want to spit water into my lane. Definitely spit water into somebody else's lane around me, right? Is possible
Mm.
distraction or intimidation factor. I don't know if it actually intimidated anybody, but made me feel like it might have. Um,
Right.
and then, the Michael Phelps slaps, I always did that, 3 times. And then, doinked the goggles a couple times, and then
Yeah.
it was off and running. I carried a rock that I found on that training trip to Utah with the cycling incident. That was down and up. If you didn't know what that gesture was, down the mountain, partially back up the mountain. Found a rock that looked like a fighter jet without the wings, so like the silhouette of it, the profile. So I carried that in a Wonder Bread bag because my coach called me Wonder Bread. through college and end of my high school career and through after college.
Yeah.
So I carried that wrapped up in my pocket.
Hmm.
And that was, yeah. To backtrack also, we talked about, mental training and diet and exercise and stuff while we were swimming. So, we
Yeah.
did all that stuff. Swam and I remember David Marsh introduced us to visualization. David coached at
Hmm.
Auburn and Las Vegas, and he coached a resident national team up in Charlotte, North Carolina for many years.
Yeah.
David introduced us to some visualization, and we used to listen to these tapes that had some music and some words about kind of relaxing the body, visualizing your race, visualizing your start, your stroke, your perfect turns, your perfect finish, all those kinds of things. And I still remember that. I remember the music. It was
Yeah.
ELO Fire On. I will forever remember that.
Yes.
Whenever I hear it on the radio, I almost want to, rip the steering wheel off the car when I hear it on the radio in the car. Uh,
Right.
it gets me all pumped when I hear about it. Sorry, that was enough. You can cut that or you can leave it in. I don't care. Um, but
ELO
yeah,
for
I remember
folks
that.
under 40 is the Electric Light Orchestra.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Your
Yeah.
brother would turn his nose up at that kind of music, of course. But
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, Derek got me into, Led Zeppelin and the Doors and Jimi Hendrix because we had a locker next to each other for years in high school. I don't know how B
Ah.
had a locker
Yeah. Being.
W. I don't know how that worked. Maybe we were both sharing with somebody and it wound up close together. But I remember he was always had his locker decoration with all that stuff, and we rode the same bus for 5 years. Um,
Right.
but yeah, so it was all music and that kind of thing was always a good motivator, and it still is today. You
Yeah.
hear a song that's a summer driving song or a winter song or a love song or whatever, but
Yeah.
music's great and purpose. So I listen to anything and everything from classical to country to current stuff to old stuff. So I like it all.
Yeah. The visualizing, that was roughly what year that you were introduced to that?
Oh, geez, had to be probably 85, 86 when David was
Wow.
coaching that.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a little bit
Yeah.
of
That was
that.
almost unheard of back then, right? Now it's a lot more mainstream.
Yeah, I would love to follow up with David, actually, Coach Marsh, and see who that was, who put those tapes out
Hmm.
there, because
Yeah.
I thought they were great. I mean, we joked about them saying, "Oh, it's a good time for us to take a nap." We make fun of everything that we don't fully
Right.
understand.
Sure.
Nutrition, relaxation, visualization, all those things are nebulous to a degree to a 15-year-old or a 25-year-old. But um,
Sure.
yeah, I'd like to know who did those, but we would. Some people would fall asleep, but I think those of us that took it seriously greatly benefited from it. So that was one of the things I think
Yeah.
that helped get me to the next level of understanding from not just the competitive piece, but the training piece and how to recover from all that and how to fuel yourself a little bit better and how to be prepared for your next competition.
Yeah. Yeah. You competed for 20 years, 25 years. If you count, the
Oh,
first time they threw you in a pool at age 5, then
yeah, 20 years.
God, yeah, that's crazy. It's a long time, a lot of dedication to stick with it through thick and thin. Do you ever any major setbacks during that time?
Yeah, I had let's see. I'm going to throw one of my roommates under the bus here, Billy Harris.
Yeah.
We were still in Ann Arbor, I think, over Thanksgiving break, and we were
Mm.
running out of doors of the dorms our sophomore year. And I had, the door with the door handle, the big long door handle that you push.
Oh yeah.
Um, I had pushed I looked at the door wrong and the hinge was on the other side. I pushed the other side. Billy hip checked me into the upright of the thing, cracked my collarbone. So
Yeah.
that kept me out for a couple of days. It wasn't too
Ouch.
bad.
Mm.
Yeah, it wasn't a clean break or anything. It was just hairline, but that kept me out. And Billy still thinks that it was my fault. Um,
Hmm.
and actually at the Olympics. So this is kind of a painful story to tell, no pun intended. So we had training camp before the games up in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I had not had an ear infection since I was probably 8 years old and barely swimming at the time. And I
Yeah.
got an ear and in my ears in a
Hmm.
week out of my event. And so I
Mm.
went to our team trainer, and he said, this ear, my right ear was completely blocked. Left ear was probably 50%, occluded. And he said, when we get back to the village, the day before the opening ceremony, have the doc take a look, and they'll fix it for you. So when I
Yeah.
did that, he went, same thing, fully blocked, partially blocked, took warm saline solution, put it into a plastic syringe and kind of inserted it through the blockage. This is kind of
Yeah.
gross. They just kind of pop the warm saline in there, and it makes your ear sneeze, in effect.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so a bunch of goo came out of there, and it was fine. The saline drained out of there. He did the other one. It hurt a little more than my right ear,
Mm.
but
Mm.
we thought it was because there was no pressure difference or anything, and it just maybe tore a little skin off of something that was in there, whatever, didn't know. So went into the next room after he had done that. I mean, that took 2 minutes. Went into the
Mm.
next room, was on massage table between two of my teammates, Mark Henderson and John
Yeah.
Olson. And
Yeah.
I think it was Mark that looked over at me and goes, dude, that's not right. And my ear was bleeding, the one that was
Mm.
partially bleeding. So I went back to the team doc, and he's like, well, it looks like you've got some fluid now behind your eardrum. And I'm like, well, I wonder how that got there, because it wasn't there because my eardrum had been punctured. So clearly the syringe went in a little too far, punctured my eardrum.
Mm.
I went to
Ooh.
practice about an hour later, dove in the water, popped straight up because the pressure was horrible. So I could not submerge myself 5 days before the last race of my career. So didn't tell my family, talked to my coach about it. He's like, well, just, stay out of the water, maybe do some kicking, with your head up, don't get wet.
Mm. Mm.
And it was just leaking out all over my pillow at night. It was really gross.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't really swim, and that totally got into my head. Even all the work I'd done, for the 20 years, as you just mentioned, in the last 4 months, all my races that kind of annualize at the same meet year after year. I'm a little faster every year. This year had been the fastest I'd been in season. So I was really looking forward to having a really good last race of my life.
Yeah.
And Sports Illustrated had picked me to at least make the podium. Um, 2 days before my race, I could go underwater, but I couldn't dive in.
Mm.
The day before, I could do a pull out, so you're maybe 3-4 feet underwater. That was okay, but I still couldn't dive because of the sudden change of pressure. The day of my race, I could dive in. It was pain free, but my brain had been so scrambled for the last week that I didn't know how I was going
Right.
to do it, whatever. So I'm doing my pace 50s. Usually you do some pace work with your coach the day of your race, where
Yeah.
you're making sure the effort you're exerting is the effort you want to use during your race, and that the times that you're achieving are kind of that effort matched with that pace to get you through your 2 minute and 10 second effort. And I could see on the pace clocks that were on the main scoreboard in Atlanta and the Olympic pool at Georgia Tech, and the
Mm.
little clock that the manual clocks, the analogs that were scrolling around, that my
Mm.
paces were off, but my coach was telling me that they were on. So I knew he was lying to me, but we didn't admit that to each other. And
Right.
got in the water for the prelim race that morning, qualified 8th. So I was the last person to make it in the final. Barely made it in by
Mm.
like less than a 10 second.
Yep.
Figured after the last, fortunate to do that. And stressed all afternoon. Usually I take a nap, didn't nap. This was the last race. My family's in the stands, my hometown crowd's there and everything. And finished 7th, well off my best time, probably 3 seconds slower than my best at World Championships 2 years prior when I'd won a silver.
Mm.
And that's it, right? So I was really slow to get out of the pool. I beat the other American,
Mm.
Forrest. That's what's important here, is that you're the top American.
Absolutely.
Just,
Yeah.
um, but no, that was not my plan, not how I wanted my career to wind up. Did not plan to go 4 more years to Sydney, and I did not. Um,
Mm.
kind of walked over to the media area to some of the, reporters that I knew. Karen Rosen was there with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She's been a longtime friend and a long-time sports writer. And she
Yeah.
was kind of first there on scene. She was like, wow, like, was kind of speechless. And we talked for a few minutes and the warm down pool, and my coach was there, Coach Urbanchek from Michigan. And he's like, I won't use the words that he used, but his accent sounds like a combination of Yosemite Sam and Elmer Fudd. He was Hungarian. So he's like, buddy, you didn't look very good out there. I'm like, well, I didn't feel very good. And I said, I knew my pace times were off in warm up this morning and tonight. And he's like, yeah, you were way off. I was lying to you. I'm like, I knew you were lying to me. We should have just talked about that, been more jovial about it. It might have, brought my guard down a bit, my expectations down a little bit. I might just been a little freer to go out and swim that night. But, during that week was pretty amazing because every day we had, different clothes provided by Speedo to wear. And, I gave my stuff away to the kids that volunteered at the meet on deck. So every day a different kid got
That's
a
cool.
cap or a t-shirt, my pair of shorts, because I was a Nike swim athlete, so I couldn't really wear that stuff, but I had to wear it for the team things. But kids were great. Had something to have signed, genuine Olympic team gear signed by the team. So that was pretty neat, but it gave all that stuff away. I still have all my goggles, except for one pair. I'll tell that story at some point, I'm sure. But
yeah.
and I was just kind of done, and then got to go and watch basketball and hung out with my wife in the around Atlanta and that kind of thing. My girlfriend at the time, but I didn't get to watch, but I got to watch USA versus Lithuania because they wore those crazy tie-dye uniforms. That was cool.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, got to watch the other aquatic sports, so water polo and synchro and diving, because that was the only venue that we could get into with our badge without getting a lot of it in the Olympic Village to go and watch other stuff. So wanted to see some track and field, to see some other stuff, but just, tickets were hard to come by because Atlanta, the ACOG did a great job of marketing that games and selling tickets to stuff. So I know they made a lot of money on that game. So that's good.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of capped your 20 plus year career, correct?
Yep, that was it. I was done. Done a couple triathlons, fun, but haven't done a lot. I just,
20 years. My wife likes, that's a long. Yeah. I was going to say 20 years is a long time to swim in the pool. Do you ever have burnout or ever get, just ready to just throw in the towel and become a monk?
No, it's funny you mentioned burnout. I will say the only time I really struggled to keep going was after 93, after my senior year in college. I knew that Atlanta had gotten the games, but I figured it was too far out for me to go. That's why I kind of kept going in 4-month seasonal segments, where I'd always have a meet to go to 4 months down the road. So just I would reset every season and just kind of go on 4-month gigs. So I would swim in a meet in December, and then one in April, and then one in August, and then one in December. So just kind of reevaluate each time until I made that move to California with Bob Bowman, and then I knew it was on for the next 2 years. So that was really the only time when I thought about, being done or being stagnant. But I still faster during that time. I think when, you hear athletes or parents talk about burnout, I think it's because they're either focused too much on the end result on their one particular event rather than everything else that encompasses the success, of that event. So are they getting better from a flexibility perspective? Are they doing better from a rest and recovery perspective, from a nutrition perspective, from a dry land training or strength training perspective, from a mental training perspective? If you're making achievements in some or one of those areas, you're still improving your chances on reaching your goal in your sport, whatever that may be, or your designation, whether it's a salesperson or a medical doctor, whatever. You have goals that you've set for yourself as a family. So if you're not doing all those other little things that total up to your ultimate success or your ultimate goal you're trying to achieve, then I can see how you'd say you're getting burned out. So if you're still
Right.
being successful, becoming more flexible, you've wanted to work towards doing a walking handstand in the gym, as long as you're progressing towards that goal, your other goals may very well also be achieving some level. I can't talk right now. Your other goals may be achieving some level of success as well. So you have to kind of keep your eyes on the periphery that leads towards your targeted focus in front of you.
Gotcha. So there's, pardon me, there's always something to work on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know a lot more now about the human body and science and nutrition and flexibility and rest and recovery and all those things and technique for every sport than we did 20 years ago, than we did 10 years ago, you know?
Yeah. You swam for 20 years. You set records in the NCAA. You went to the Atlanta Olympics. And then you transitioned to being one of us normal humans. So tell me about that.
No,
What does that look like and feel like?
uh, it was a slow transition, but a really good one. So, um, like I said, I'd met my girlfriend during Atlanta, now my wife of 25 years, Ann Grossman. She was a professional tennis player. And we met the night before the Michigan Ohio State game in a bar in Ann Arbor. She's
Mm.
from Columbus, Ohio. I spent a lot of time in Ann Arbor, so you would not think that we'd get along. But we are the opposite of that ESPN commercial that if it weren't for sports, this wouldn't be so disgusting. Um, the Ohio State Michigan couple. Um, but yeah, so she knew a couple of swimmers that I knew, and I knew a couple of college tennis players that she was aware of. Um, and we just started talking and started dating, and then all of a sudden the Olympics are over. We went from Atlanta to the White House visit, on the lawn and shaking hands with the Clintons in the White House. And I flew directly from DC to Canada and traveled with my wife on the professional tennis tour for a year and a half. That I like to consider that time as me being her manager. For
Mm.
a long time, it was on my resume that I was her manager, but really all I did was
Yes.
help carry bags and peel off sweaty socks after a match because um, as a swimmer on a national team or on a college team, you're not booking your own travel. You're not even holding your passport unless you need it to exchange money or go through another country's customs. I didn't know how to book a ticket. I didn't know how to book a hotel, and I was 26-year-old, and I was pretty worthless as a manager to her. Um, I had no idea how to do any of that stuff. But I traveled with her and was like her support staff of one for about a year and a half until I took a job at USA Swimming. And we moved to Colorado in December, January of 97, 98. So we had just gotten married and took an internship position at USA Swimming as their coordinator of national events and the Alumni Association. So I built USA Swimming's Alumni Association from scratch. It was really my first time using the internet and yellowpages.com or whatever it was, white
Right.
pages, and looking up people and trying to locate former members of USA Swimming national teams, Olympic teams, World Championship teams, dual meets with Russia and that kind of thing, and the
Yeah.
coaching staffs and putting an alumni association together. And then I put together a newsletter. So did that for a couple of years, and then kind of stumbled into an opportunity to work for a consumer products company based out of California called Day Runner, which was the
Hmm.
first paper organizer, the kind of the predecessor
Hmm.
to the Franklin Plan. They stole our
Yes.
idea. Yep.
Yeah.
Uh, So yeah, worked for them and then got into sales then, and that was 1999, and had a couple
Mm.
of consumer product sales jobs for 7 or 8 years. Worked for a renewable energy company out of Houston for a year. Then worked for NetJets, the fractional business jet, part of Berkshire Hathaway, to Columbus,
Mm.
Ohio. Tremendous experience, unbelievable company, and we
Mm.
started a nonprofit in Ohio that benefited the Comprehensive Cancer Center, the James Comprehensive Cancer Center at Ohio State. For cancer research, and NetJets helped to underwrite year one of that, and it was one of my last
Excellent.
projects before I joined that company, which is called Pelotonia. It's still around today. They've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for cancer research there at the James, and I
Excellent.
think they're excess of 20 million a year now, every year, with 7,000 riders every year that participate in this 2-day ride around Ohio, which is pretty incredible to see that. So cancer research has always been something I've been passionate about. I think we've
Yeah,
all
good.
lost a friend, a coworker, a family member, a
Mm,
spouse, a child to cancer. I've got
mm,
a Swim Across America shirt on. It's one of the charities I'm most passionate about now, which is this was founded
good.
back in the 80s. A couple of guys that Jeff Keith was one of them. Pretty incredible outfit, but now there's
Mm,
25 of these events around the country that benefit primarily pediatric cancer research and survivorship
yeah,
clinics around the country. Raised more than $100 million since our inception, 30 plus 40 years ago. And I try to do as many of them that I can per year. So they're not races. Some of them are kind of races, but they're fun events that raise money for the local comprehensive cancer centers around the country. Um,
mm,
Go to swimacrossamerica.org if you want to check out more and
yeah,
participate as a swimmer or a volunteer. They'd love to have you, or donate to one of your local swimmers that's doing it. But they're great events. They're fun. For us, we get in the water and we swim as angel swimmers, which means for someone who's not comfortable swimming in the Atlantic Ocean for, a mile or two or three or whatever the distance is for that particular event, we essentially swim next to them. We're almost a portable lifeguard, and we're encouraging all along the way. And we get to be close to these people that have incredible stories to tell and to share, whether they've lost a loved one to cancer or whatever's brought them into the event. We get to know that person, and they're pretty incredible events that are really neat grassroots stuff that's grown over the years from
good.
four guys across a pond, out near New York, or across a river or a body of water, to the event it's grown into today with so many people and so many volunteers and so many dollars raised is pretty incredible to be a part of.
What an amazing experience. Thank you for giving back to the community. So that's really wonderful. Hats off to you, Eric. Any
You know,
advice to any aspiring athletes?
Advice to aspiring athletes: listen to your parents. Go to bed when they
Aspiring,
tell
not expiring, or both.
you. Both. Um, Same. Even if you're expiring, listen to your parents. Um, no, it's never. No dream is too big, right? You kind of have to have a set of goals. I think is important. Have something that is achievable, that you can absolutely knock out. Like if you're benching 100 pounds, I want to bench 110 5 times. Okay, great. Work to achieve that. That's pretty easily measurable. Have something that's a little bigger, that's a little stretch, and then have the pie in the sky. Because I think it's very rare that people overachieve their wildest expectations, right? So have kind of tiered goals that are achievable, possibly achievable, maybe achievable, and probably not achievable. Maybe not as a goal, say, I'm going to be the first person to walk in space without a spacesuit. That's probably not achievable. Um, but to say, hey, I want to be, Olympic champion 5 times before I retire from the sport of swimming, great. Put that out there. Put that on a board. Tell a few people about it, and it makes you accountable. Right? The more people you vocalize your goals, or they can see them written on a piece of paper or a noteboard, something in your bathroom mirror or in your closet that only you can see for at least a time frame, put it out there so that you're accountable to those goals and other people can hold you accountable as well.
Awesome. I like it. Anything else that you want to talk about or mention or share while we're still chatting here?
Sure. I get asked this question a lot. I went to a conference years ago in Colorado Springs, and it was at one of our excursions out at night was a tour of the Olympic Training Center that I had spent
Mm,
many, many hours and nights and weeks training at in Colorado Springs over my years on the national team. And even before that, we would go and do a training camp at altitude there in Colorado. So I've spent
mm,
so many nights in dorm beds in Colorado Springs, I can't count, and more meals there than I can count. But we had this excursion out there, and it was a great tour. I didn't really need the tour, but when we stepped off of the buses taking us there from the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs to the OTC, there were about a dozen resident athletes that were there to greet us. So Olympians and Paralympians and aspiring both. Um,
Mm.
and we got a chance to talk with them. And I was on the last bus coming over from the hotel. So I was one of the last people that they were waiting to greet. They didn't know I was coming because I'm just some seventh place guy from 96. But I got off the bus and I think I was more excited to meet them than they were to meet me, of course, because I was giddy. I'm always giddy to be around another athlete that's,
Mm.
chasing their, whether it's a pro football player, a pro tennis player, a pro golfer, or a swimmer who's 10. I always want to hear kind of what they're doing and what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I got the chance to talk with them for about an hour right after I got off the bus.
Mm.
As everybody else is going on their tour, I'm the holdup. I'm the speed bump for everybody else having their tour guides. But I just got
Yeah.
a chance to talk with them. And the the thing they wanted to know most was we're all still passionately competing in our sport, but how did you make the transition from athlete to normal person? Right? I think you said that earlier.
Mm.
How do you be a normal person? And
Yes.
you'll never be a normal person if you consider yourself not one, but you can be as
Right.
normal as you want to consider yourself. We've all done. Any athlete has always done crazy stuff to kind of achieve their goals. Um, but my advice to them was talk to as many people as you can, and especially while you're
Mm.
still competing outside of your
Mm.
sport, and tell them who you are and what you're doing, what you're passionate about. So if you're that passionate about what you're doing now, there's a pretty significant likelihood that you'll be that passionate about what you might do next, whether that's a
Mm.
sales guy like I work for now, or as an IT analyst for a company. If you're passionate about one thing, you're pouring all of your time and your energy and your emotion into one activity, you're going to be that passionate about other things in your future, right? It can be tough to go from the spotlight. And I did not have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Thank God I didn't have TikTok then. It's horrible. Or all that stuff, right? And I know this is going on social media, so I can't really bash it too badly. But we didn't have those distractions that kids do now, right? That athletes do now.
Right.
I didn't have a cell phone until I was married, maybe even with a
Yeah.
child at first. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I think my first cell phone was when I went to work for Day Runner in '99. So I was
Mm.
months away from having my child. I was 29 years old. Right?
Mm.
You see 5-year-olds with phones. So
Yes.
it's a whole set of distractions and delusions um, that if you listen to it and you pay enough attention to it, can be incredibly distracting towards what you are trying to achieve. It can be
Mm.
beneficial. You have access to a lot more information. So if you want to learn how to, reprogram your microwave so it doesn't beep and you can't figure it out on your own, there's a YouTube video for that.
Absolutely.
But there's also a ton of stuff out there that's negative. So I know every athlete on every stage at every level gets negative stuff from all sorts of people, and it's hard to block that out. I didn't have to block that
Mm.
out other than what I heard in person, from somebody that I didn't get along with on another team or somebody else's best friend going, oh, that guy's terrible, whatever. That's easy, right? But to be inundated by it every time you open up your phone, every time you open up an app, you're trying to scroll through there and see what, direct messages you've gotten from your friends and supporters and your coaches and your family. And you're, completely inundated by negative stuff from people that are just out there trying to bring you down. I can't imagine
Yeah.
what that's like as a 20-year-old
Mm.
year old trying to set, right? Can't imagine. Um, but there's great information to be had out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can't tell you how to manage that. I can only tell you kind
Right.
of what we encourage our kids to pay attention to and not pay attention to. So it's hard. I really can't imagine what that's like. But yeah, it's a different world to set some goals and be out there. And now with NIL and everything too, holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I just thing yesterday about the Florida Gator, right? That was set to make 13 million in his career while playing at
Right.
Florida before he was a professional football player. I was like,
Yeah.
holy smokes. It's unbelievable to me. But great, good for
Times have
them.
changed.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yep. We're winding down here, Eric. So I really appreciate your time. You're a very giving
Yeah.
man. Thank you so much for sharing your accomplishments and just how you kind of muddle through life. And once again, it's an absolute pleasure having you on. So thank you.
No, I appreciate the time. Thank you for listening to me ramble and tell my sad stories about killing your sister's cat back in 1986. I apologize for that. Please tell Monique. Derek,
Absolutely.
thank you again. The excellent taste in music in high school and introduced me to some of those classic rock bands that are still classic today. And Forrest, thank you for doing what you're doing. Of course, you did do the first Photoshop on version 1.0 of our Karis Brothers holiday card. I work for a company that manages catastrophic workers' comp claims. It's a niche within a niche in the work comp insurance world. But my friend and I, my coworker, my colleague, my cohort, and I were called the Karras brothers, like step brothers. And Forrest did an
Mm,
incredibly disturbing job of photoshopping our faces into their movie poster. Maybe you can edit that into this podcast and show a quick flash of it. It is
absolutely.
it's still framed by a number of our clients. We are now on version 4.0 of those. I've got a marketing person in our company that does it, so I don't weight you down with our crazy requests last minute to put together my holiday
All good.
card.
More
But
than happy to help you anytime. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Nothing will ever be as disturbing as the original, but it's good stuff. I'll send you copies if you don't. They're incredible. But he's a
I
wizard,
look forward to it.
so make sure you put him to work.
Definitely. Thanks again, Eric. I really appreciate you.
All right, all good. Have a great one. Thanks.
Take care.